4, 3, 2, 1.
Hit it. Experience 24 hours of head-to-head AWS sessions from around the world.
Mic check, 1, 2.
Jaws PANKRATION 2021. Up till down.
Hello all, thank you for joining in. Thank you to the Japan AWS user group for running this event. They also sent a translation device that I will try and use. So let's start. So this is the agenda. We'll start talking about me. We'll look at the problems. We'll see why Fargate and why not Lambda. And then I will show you a little bit of code which you can use to build a Fargate task using CDK. So about me, my name is Sathyajith Bhat. You can call me Satya. I'm a site reliability engineer at Adobe. I'm also an AWS community hero. I'm the author of 2 books. One is Practical Docker with Python. The second book is called the CDK book, focusing on CDK with 3 other community heroes. I've also been organizing the AWS user group Bangalore. And even though I'm in Romania right now, the pandemic, even though it's problematic, it's helped us with a remote organization. So let's see the problems. As a site reliability engineer, as an operational engineer, we have a lot of operational ad hoc tasks. These ad hoc tasks can be like, the developers asking for database exports, for Redis cache exports, or any sort of thing that you will need access to an EC2 instance. For database exports, for example, because the RDS requires to be in VPC, we'll also need an EC2 instance to connect to it. Let's consider an example of a MySQL database export. So to do a MySQL RDS export, first we need to spin up an EC2 instance. Then we need to wait for the EC2 instance to be ready. So that will take like 2 minutes. Then we need either the right SSH key, or if you're using a single sign-on or some sort of certificate, you need to have that ready. Then to start the export, you need to write your MySQL dump command. That's dump command, not dump command. Sorry about that. Usually commands like this, you would usually have it copy pasted somewhere. If you don't have it copy pasted, then it can take a couple of tries before you get it right. So that's more time wasted. Then you wait for the data to be exported. And if your data is large, it can take anywhere from a few minutes to a few hours. Once you have the data ready, then you need to copy it over. So you can do SCP transfer, or you can transfer it to S3, and then you need to manage the access for that. So this is all a bit of a pain. Now, instead of doing all of this, why not just automate the whole thing? In the last talk, we saw about EC2 automation. So similarly, we can, instead of using EC2 instances, we can use Fargate. So what is Fargate? Fargate is a managed container service by AWS. With Fargate, you can run Docker containers without you having to run the infrastructure yourself. Fargate is actually an ECS mode, Elastic Container Service, But when you start Fargate, you say Fargate as launch type. And instead of choosing EC2 as a launch type, you select Fargate as a launch type. You still need to create a cluster, but you don't have to actually, you still have to create the cluster, but you don't have to manage the physical infrastructure of the cluster. It's a logical construct, right? So you provide a Docker image, you provide how much CPU and memory it requires. You define networking specialties, VPC instance, for example, you provide the IAM roles, credentials, and then you launch a task. And it's as simple as that. Since everything is wrapped in a Docker container, you don't have to provision the instance. You don't need to build an AMI. The Docker image will have everything. So what are the advantages of Fargate? The main thing example is, you bring your own Docker image. With Docker image, you can have your own private registries. So you don't necessarily have to use Docker Hub and face the rate limiting from Docker. You can run Fargate Docker images in a VPC, so it can be secure. You can invoke the Fargate task whenever you want. You don't have to keep it running 24/7. You can run it whenever you want. And then when it shuts down, it will automatically exit. The billing is per usage. So you get billed from the image pool until the task terminates. You run it as a task instead of a service. So when the container exits, it will automatically stop charging you. For monitoring, logging, there's support for exporting to logs, exporting logs to CloudWatch, to Splunk, to Firelens, to FluentD, many other such tools. You also get higher ephemeral storage space. And as of late, you also get persistent storage with EFS support. Fargate is nice, but what are the disadvantages that you should be aware of? So the first thing is there is no free tier, unlike Lambda, which gives you 1 million gigabyte seconds of free space, free time. There is no free tier, and you are billed for a minimum of 1 minute. So even if your task runs for 1 second, 5 milliseconds, you get charged for 1 minute. If you're using any environment variables, they get listed on the AWS console. So do not send any secrets via environment variables, else it will be visible on the AWS console. You can use the parameter store. Fargate has integration with that, so it can fetch directly from the parameter store, and the secrets will not be available in the console. If you would like to use EBS, there is no support yet, but it is listed on the roadmap. But since EFS support has landed, it's a lot easier now to have persistent storage. The other problem is you have to play the CPU memory bingo. What I mean is you cannot have any specific combinations. It has to be in this specific. So if you need 0.5 vCPU and if you need 4 GB of memory, that is not possible. You have to jump to 2 vCPU. Before we jump into why not Lambda, I still have to say that despite all of these advantages, it's still a lot easier and better off to use Fargate. It takes a lot of your operational overhead. So why not Lambda? The first thing is you will have to write a Lambda function, which does the equivalent of your task. In our case, it has to be the equivalent of MySQL dump. but it can be, you'll have to re-engineer and write everything, especially for those binary programs that are already existing. You could package that binary into Lambda, but you have to, because Lambda essentially runs a custom runtime, either it is Python or something else, you have to use things like system, which does a shell exec, and I don't like that. It's bad. Recently, there was support for Lambda containers where you can package your Lambda using a container, but you still need to build it. And your Lambda, your container still has to maintain the Lambda runtime. And fundamentally, a Lambda is still an event-driven task. So there should be something to call a Lambda instead of invoking a Fargate task on schedule or whatever. It's not a big deal, but there's subtle difference there. More problems, I would say. I guess the biggest problem would be the Lambda runtime limits. So any Lambda function will have only 15 minutes of runtime. After that, it gets terminated. It used to be 5 minutes earlier, which was 2 years back, or maybe even earlier than that. But right now it's 15 minutes. So if you need longer runtime, then you can't use Lambda. And the other problem is that you have only 512 MB of temp space, which can be insufficient for, say, data export tasks. So these are the reasons why I went with Fargate. So let me show you a little bit of code with which you can use to build a Fargate task. So this is a CDK code. CDK is AWS Cloud Development Kit. It lets you build infrastructure using actual code. So in this case, instead of using Terraform or CloudFormation, we are generating a Fargate task definition and building it using 3 lines of code. And this first line here, what it does is it creates a Docker image asset, which means CDK will manage the code for you. It will build the container and it will publish it to the registry. So you don't have to worry. So you don't have to worry about building it and publishing it. In the second line, we define how much CPU and how much memory we want. And in the third line, we say, use this image and build a task. That's it. 3 lines of code will save you many hundred lines of CloudFormation. Now, you can use whatever Docker image that you want. So you see here directory. This points to the directory where the Docker file exists. So you can build your own custom Docker file with whatever contents that you want, whatever tasks that you want. And this is why I say with CDK, it makes it easy to run everything. So that's all I had for today. Thank you for joining in. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. My Twitter handle is here on the slides. It's SATHYABHAT, Sathyajith Bhat. The code for the slides and for the infrastructure is here in this GitHub. And you have other links to the relevant resources. Thank you very much for joining in, and thank you, Japan AWS User Group, for running this wonderful event. Thank you.
Music's loud and I'm feeling alright. It's slow motion, baby, it's just you and I. Yeah, and how